E.T. for the Atari 2600. A legendarily bad game. Every so often, some games that are produced turn out to just be bad. They get destroyed by critics and fans online, and then the world moves on. But sometimes there are games that are so spectacularly bad that their horribleness takes on a life of its own. Such is the case for titles such as Superman 64, Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, and E.T. for Atari 2600. These games make up a pantheon by no means esteemed of easy targets for mockery amongst gaming fans. But what is it that makes the game so reviled? What is the story of this piece of history in the gaming world, and what of its legacy? Well, we're going to explore all that in this video. The story of the game's development may have sounded like a miracle waiting to happen to some, but this some would have been an infinitesimally small proportion of the human population. E.T. the Extraterrestrial the movie was released in June of 1982. Immediately following that, Atari would enter into negotiations to have someone make a game based off of the movie. Atari successfully acquired the license, but at the pretty huge cost of more than $20 million. While video games were popular at the time, this was still a pretty high figure. To make matters even more interesting, they were given 5 weeks for development on this game. Atari wanted to capitalize on the hype of the movie and wanted to have the game completed by the beginning of September, and that target would be met without delays. Incidentally, E.T. the game would only initially enjoy strong sales, and it would go on to sell some more than 1 million copies all told. But that's not the entire story, as about twice as many copies remained unsold during the same holiday shopping period. Atari had manufactured many copies, but retailers were canceling their orders, with other competing titles in the market. The game was later repeatedly discounted in stores, but it wasn't enough to stoke demand. Atari itself would later receive back the vast majority of the copies that it produced. And for the game itself, well, players play as E.T., and the main goal of the game is phoning home, and he can only do so by acquiring 3 pieces of a phone, phoning home, and then moving to where a spaceship waiting to take him home will be. These phone pieces are found in pits, randomly assigned. There is no logic to the placement, no hint as to where the pieces will be. Players must simply hope for the best and find the phone pieces. The game doesn't simply let you spend an infinite amount of time looking for phone pieces either, as E.T. can only search and act so long as he has health, represented by a meter. It can be replenished by finding Reese's Pieces candy, thus extending the time searching for phone pieces or movement in general. When E.T. summons the spaceship, after having phoned home, E.T. has to make contact with the spaceship before a timer expires. If players are able to complete this task before time runs out, an iteration of the game is complete and they'll have earned a set amount of points, with this score boosted by any unused Reese's Pieces. But the fun just doesn't stop there, as the game places you into another round of what you just played through. You must now search for 3 phone pieces again, randomly assigned to 3 different locations. The landing site and the site at which you make the call to summon the spaceship, they're also randomly assigned. You will repeat this ad infinitum until you run out of energy, either E.T. or the player. E.T. also has lives to manage and must evade 2 antagonists, which appear according to the set difficulty level. The scientist will transport you to Washington, D.C., a location within the game's map, thereby impeding your current search progress and forcing you to waste more energy. The FBI agent has the ability to take away phone pieces that you've found, forcing you to search through pits for them again. Suffice it to say, there's not much here to be excited about. The game isn't complex, and it by no means had to be, but what we have here is tedious and repetitive. We might be led to believe that a great deal of thought went into the concept of the game. E.T. has to phone home, as was important to the movie, and that's represented in an original way by assembling a phone rather than using a toy. But in what way is the searching through pits connected to the movie? What depth does it add, even as an original idea? All of this randomness would ostensibly create a sense of replayability, but the existing game isn't fun enough to repeat doing any such thing. Graphically, there's nothing special about the game either. It's almost as if there's nothing about the game at all, which is good. What the hell happened to E.T.? What the hell happened to this game? Well, that's the question, isn't it? What the hell happened? It's not really inconceivable to think that a decent game could have been made given these time constraints, setting aside the absurd circumstances of the license's acquisition and the development timeframe. But the game itself just isn't great. This game doesn't belong in anybody's home, it belongs in a ditch, and that's where many copies actually are, or at least there were. Some may be aware of the story of Atari dumping copies of their games into a landfill, and it was something of an urban legend for years. But as it turns out, in 2014, that myth would prove to be true. More than 30 years ago, hundreds of copies of E.T. and other Atari games were tossed away into a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico by Atari. But in an April 2014 excavation, these games were unearthed and later sold, netting more than $100,000, decently over the excavation's $50,000 cost. The process had to be approved by local regulators, and the landfill itself was something of a treasure hunt, found using old photos and maps. The copies that were found have been placed within museums all over the world, and with that said, E.T. the game as a cultural icon isn't really an enduring phenomenon. It's mostly something like an unfortunate joke whose story is more or less finally closed with the news of this excavation, relegated to history. It's a reflection of commercialism and hype at its most accelerated and most out of touch. It's a cautionary tale for game developers too. If you've ever found the pleasure of playing the game, tell us your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think that you could make a better game? Or even come up with a more interesting game idea than the final product of E.T. that was released to the world in holiday season of 1982? And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.